We'll call this meeting to order. Take the roll, please.
Here. Brooks. Here. Howard. Here. Gala. Here. Singer. Moran. Here. Rice. Harris.
Here.
Trainier. Here. Benefield.
Here.
Fritz. Freitag. Gould.
Here.
Gallic.
Here.
Frizzalong.
Here.
Winfrey. Here. Parker. Here. Staley Ferry. Here. Davish.
Here.
Wilhelmie. Hart. Here. Chiminello.
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Collins. Ferry.
Here.
And Eustace.
Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before you started, I'd also like to just...
You're not on.
How about now?
Yeah.
If I'm not on, I can just speak louder, actually. Before we get started, I just want to recognize some folks that are here. That's why I was asking as most of you know. Even though I see your bodies out there, can't always distinguish your faces. So I was asking Chuck, who's out there? I was asking, who's out there? So of course, County Executive Walsh is joining us today. Chief Judge Schonstadt, I believe, is with us today. The Sheriff Kelly is here. He's there somewhere. And am I missing anybody?
King County.
Oh, I'm going to get to that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for your help. And we have a special guest, the Chairman of King Key County, Mike Fawcett. Mike, thanks for joining us. I think he wants to see how we're doing it here in Will County. And as I mentioned to County Executive Walsh, well, we're moving forward, but don't think it's not scary. It is. And I want to say that, it is a big step. And this is the next big step for us in putting a financial package together to address some of our capital needs. So thank you all for attending. Mike, thanks for coming down. And I guess my advice is to you would be I don't know, get the RTA reading or something. We were fortunate that we did have additional revenue that's going to help us with this going forward. So having said that, next thing I would do is the minutes to approve today. There's no minutes to approve, and we'll get to old business. I'm really just going to kind of sit here because, Mike Frizzalong, along with our staff, and along with Steve Wilhelmie, have really worked on this, along with our outside consultants. Occasionally I would put my 2 cents in, but they pretty much have worked on this, like I said, along with the county executive staff, our finance department. So I'm going to basically hand this off to you. Did I used to have a microphone on there? Are you sitting with the values? So you want to come up here?
Mike, can you turn this up?
What
would you prefer to do?
I mean, you can.
Is it okay with
Well, why don't you sit there? Just for you, you can pass this thing back and forth.
He's trying to go.
Hello, it's good, right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
All right, as I think I said at our last meeting, you can't change a plan until you have a plan. And so at the last meeting, we put forth a plan for Building Will, for all of the projects for Building Will. And now it's time to change that plan, kind of refine it so we can get to the point where we all agree. I think we're going to start, I think everybody has a hard copy of here, but what we're going to start is on page 3. And as you can see up on the screen, you can't read anything because it's so small. And it's not much bigger on the sheet of A. But basically, we're going to start with the timetable. And again, what happened is we came together with staff from the Executive's Office, and Steve and I sat down and kind of refined what we had talked about. Timeline probably stayed fairly similar, and then we kind of reworked some of the other parts of the plan. So if you look, if you can read those small numbers, simply, yeah, we have it by quarters, but the design completion of the Sheriff's Department, and we had some good news yesterday about what's happening with the 911 facility, but we should be able to kind of complete our design within the next couple of months, which means we should be able to break ground, second quarter, around about May for the Sheriff's Department. And based on building time frames, it's going to get us into that building about September of 2017. What that allows us to do is start the demolition of the courthouse, of the Midwest Bank, where we're going to put the courthouse in that time frame. So if you back up those dates, we need to be starting our design time in the next month or so, because it's going to take 12 to 18 months, probably in that 14-month range, to do our design, which means once we move the sheriff out into the new building, out of Midwest, we can start that demo in the last quarter of 2017, which means we're really breaking ground, putting foundations in 2018. That would allow us with the IGA that we'll pass and Joliet will pass, 2017, they'll be able to put in their 2018 budget, our first payment, and I think you'll see that in the next several sheets. And that'll give us a completion time of 2 years or so, getting us in there at the end of 2019, or at the beginning of 20, depends on how construction time goes. We also have down the northern satellite. We talked about that being part of this financial plan, but we really don't have timing yet. We have to decide where we're going to be up north for the northern satellite. And realistically, if we start small, like I talked about at our last meeting, and plan for a facility that can have 2 to 4 courtrooms and have a clerk's office and other services that are needed up north to make it easy, I believe we can plan that facility in phases so that at the minimum we're starting out with 2 courthouses and any associated things we need for the court. So that design time shouldn't take a long time depending on the land we pick, which obviously we want to pick something that's easy for us to design around. So within the time frame that we do the courthouse, it's very possible that we start design of that facility after we start the courthouse, possibly even finish it before the courthouse is done, because you're talking about maybe a 1 year or less build on that, since it's a smaller facility, and the design time shouldn't be that difficult either. So that's why right now, until we kind of decide where we're going up there, but it is in the financial plan, so there's money in this whole plan to build that northern satellite. And then the last building would be the health department building, and based on these other things we have going, which is a lot, we probably wouldn't get into the design start until about April of 2020, right after we finish the courthouse, everything else is out of the way, and then hopefully break ground for that maybe a year or 2 later. I mean, that building, again, would probably be similar size to what the Sheriff's Department is going to be, so not as heavy a design time as like the courthouse is going to be. But so we could start that as late as as early as 2021. And then hopefully finish that by 2023. So that's kind of the time frame, and what what Rashawn and Karen did was kind of based on those dates, we kind of backed up how we're going to do the money and the funds. And one thing I'll say at the beginning, I'll turn it over to them to explain a little bit more about how they laid out the bonds. Again, this is a plan. When we put down that it's the interest is 4.2, 4.5, 4.755, no one knows what it's going to be. Could it be less? It's possible. Could it be a little bit more? That's possible. But you have to kind of assume some things, just like we assume some things about the income that's going to come in. I know you'll mention this in your thing, but when we talked about the RTA funds growth, the growth right now is 4 to 4.5% a year. And I think I used it in my first meeting we had. I used a 2% growth and a 4% growth just to show the difference. So we kind of settled on 3% to say that's not real aggressive, it's a little conservative, but it's a little closer to what's probably going to happen. So that was used in here. We have in our, any assumption we have about anything else that might grow, we've either not shown growth or shown little growth. So we can say, just in case it stays static, we still have the funds to do what we're going to do. The other thing is Rashawn and Karen, besides doing the regular job, spent eons of time on this, doing the bonds and laying that out. But we haven't had Leslie's here from Wells Fargo today, and probably can't answer a lot of questions on our plan yet because they haven't really got into the weeds on it. That's their charge after today, is to get into the weeds and say, okay, now if you do this, you'll save here. If we backload bonds here, if we do different things, we'll be in a better shape. So what Rashawn and Karen tried to do is show pretty much a level kind of payment plan and how it would work out so that we do have funds. I'm sure Wells Fargo is going to find even better opportunities for us on how we do our staging of bonds. And like I said, with the interest rates, again, this is a plan. Things may change. If interest rates go down, we may hold off on the time frame that we do the bonds. If we see interest rates are going to spike, then we may say, hey, we want to bond a little earlier, and we'll hold the money in check. So I think I'll turn it over to you guys. Who's going to start, Rashawn or Karen?
I think I'll start.
Right, it's Karen? Okay.
I'm allowed anyway. I'd just like to make a couple of comments, and then I'm going to start going through the plan page by page. The plan we're presenting today is simply a framework, and it allows us to move forward with our capital projects, and it looks out over getting them completed over the next 6 to 8 years. It should be used to help us make decisions about what our priorities are going forward and other spending decisions. If we're going to lock into a capital plan for the sheriff's facility and for the courthouse, we need to be cognizant of that as we make every decision going forward. Budget planning, anything we do, we need to have this in the back of our minds. Some of the highlights of this plan, we're going to propose using cash reserves for the courthouse design, for the sheriff's facility and the dispatch center, the radio system, case management system, and Weber Road. We're proposing issuing bonds at $225 million over the next 4 years. We would begin that in 2018. That would provide us a reimbursement of $17 million. We would reimburse ourselves for the courthouse design and for the dispatch center. It would provide funding for the courthouse with some flexibility to add additional floors if we decide that that's necessary, and to cover some sort of satellite facility. Again, that would all be dependent on what our decisions are in the planning process for the courthouse. It will also provide funding for a new health department building. In this plan, the bonds are issued staggered at, $70 million, $50 million, $75 million, and $30. That's all contingent on our needs and the timing of the projects, as Mike had referenced. The sheriff's facility has to be completed first, and the First Midwest building vacated before we can start demolition and move forward with construction. It could be possible to structure the bonds differently to meet our needs. We would certainly want to take advantage of any opportunities in the bond market, which we already have Leslie here. This plan will be paid for with a combination of dedicated courthouse funding sources, RTA dollars, and some funds that were previously taken from the corporate fund. You know, ADF bonds, once they drop off, they'll be used to pay for debt service. So with that, I'll start going through, beginning on page 1. So page 1 lays out what our funding sources are, what we're proposing the debt service would be, and then what additional resources we're going to have to use to meet that debt service. The first column on your left, and I apologize, it is a little hard to read, is courthouse fees. Those fees were put in place early in 2015. They are dedicated solely for use of a court facility. Those will be used to help offset debt service. The second column is parking lot.
Can I interrupt?
Sure.
And this is one of those columns where I said we were conservative. The chief judge is doing a study for us to show what the growth in caseload is going to be, because obviously this money is coming in by caseload. Now, that 25-year, $1.5 million would mean that the caseload is the same for 25 years, but we know it's going to grow. So that column will grow, that dollar amount will grow over that 25 years. We'll use some historical data to show how much, but again, by being conservative this way, saying it doesn't grow, we're at least protecting ourselves in the long haul.
Column 2 is parking lot fee. We recently increased the fee rate. This $300,000 is based on no change in activity at the parking lot currently. There is talk about adding parking spots in that area, depending on what we work out with the city of Joliet. This could go up from here. So this is
Odds are we're not going to keep that same rate for 25 years.
Right.
We've moved it a couple of times over the last 10, 12 years, so we'll probably move up as well.
the column 3 is the Joliet contribution. I believe that intergovernmental agreement is supposed to be on the board agenda for next week. That would start once we put the first. I can't think of the word. We have to have the building torn down and beginning construction for that payment to kick in. So we tried to time that. Again, if we're delayed a little bit or if we're a little ahead of schedule, that would move it. The fourth column is landfill fees. The board just recently approved the expansion of the Laraway facility. This is what we would expect the additional revenue to be. It could go up, it could go down. This is what we feel is a conservative estimate. Column 5 is the Public Building Commission. Currently, the Public Building Commission levy covers this $2 million, which had been used in the past for courthouse renovations. Since we won't be renovating the old courthouse, we could dedicate this to bond service on the new one. Column 6 are the rebates that we currently receive on the road bonds. Those will end as the road bonds are paid off, but until that time, they're available to dedicate to the courthouse project. Up until now, those rebates have been used to help renovate the nursing home. That should be completed this year, so that money would be freed up for other uses. The next column is the public defender rent. We made the assumption that if we do put an extra floor on, we would have some extra space to maybe move a department or an office that's currently paying rent into the new courthouse, or mix up with buildings that we already own. So any savings in rent could be dedicated to bond payments.
And that's the current rent that the public defenders are paying, $240. One floor would, White has assured us they can squeeze them into one floor, and it would make sense for them to be there, them needing probation there. So it makes sense to move that into this.
The next column is, in the first 2 years, while we're collecting all these dedicated funding sources, we don't necessarily need all of them until debt service kicks in. So it's more of a way of just showing we have them available because we're not spending them the first few years. And then the final column in blue is the total of all these dedicated resources. So you can see that at its highest, we're up $7-8 million a year. Because some of these, as you can see, do drop off earlier than others. The next column is the courthouse design. We're estimating that currently to be $12 million.
So Jason.
I would hope
Jason
that's
just
accurate.
passed out.
Is he laughing?
He's smiling.
He's shaking his head yes. We're proposing to pay cash for that. Some of it would come from these dedicated sources. What we couldn't meet, and again, the timing of this is something that we can't control right this minute. Anything that wouldn't be covered by the direct courthouse sources would come from RTA. This would also be something that we reimburse ourselves for with the first bond issuance. The next column is what we're picturing the debt service would look like. In very simple calculations. 3 or 4 bond issuances at 25 years each. Interest rates that Wells Fargo had kind of given us at looking out into the future. There's nothing fancy about this. That's what we have Wells Fargo here for, to help us maybe arrange those to be a little more advantageous or take advantage of the market when we are going to issue bonds. For now, they're just straight principal and interest. The column next to that is titled additional money or additional dollars needed to meet debt service. So this is what we still need to cover after we have all our dedicated courthouse sources. The 3 columns following is how we're proposing to cover that. When we get down to 2024, the current ADF bonds begin to be paid off. That money would be freed up and available to use for this debt service. The road bonds are paid off in 2030, I believe. And so 2031, those funds would be available to use towards this debt service. Before those 2 things happen, in the years prior to that, we would be looking to use funds from RTA to kind of fill that gap to meet debt service.
And one of the things, let me say, these 2 columns here, and even the third column, that's what we have to look at, what can change. Because when we roll off the ADF funds, if we take $4 million a year, we could do $4 million a year this whole time and then take the pressure off of some of the RTA. But I mean, that's how we can shift back and forth with both revenue streams. We just have to look at what makes the most sense at that time.
Okay. Page 2 is simply notes that go back to page 1, and I'm not going to go over those because I think I probably covered everything in the comments I just made. Page 3 is the project timeline. Mike had already gone through that. Page 4 is what we're thinking that the bond issuance would look like, and I'll let Rashawn make some comments about that.
So, as Mike and Karen both stated, the bond issuance schedule reflects a debt service of $225 million. The debt service is calculated based on a 25-year bond. The bonds will be issued at the following intervals: $70 million at 4.25% in 2018, $50 million at 4.50% in 2019, $75 million at 4.75% in 2020, and the last bond at $30 million at 5% in 2021. And then the last column just basically shows our proposed annual debt service payment at the $225 million. And as mentioned before, this is just basically a simple calculation. You'll see in each category for each bond issuance, we have the total debt service that shows, what that bond payment would be for that amount. And this is basically a simple overview. Once Victor and Leslie take a closer look at this, they can structure how those payments could be, how the schedule could be structured and how those payments could be spread over time. And I'm going to turn it back over to Karen, who will go over the RTA cash flow schedule.
Mike, I have one question real quick. Yeah. We go back to the Millville project, funding and debt payment portion. The page right, yeah. No, keep going backwards, towards the front, the first page, yes. How is it that I'm just curious, in 2028, 29, and 30, the right side, the 5.7 million, how does it go from 3.9 to 5.7, then drops to 2.7?
Because you see the 6.8 here?
Yeah.
After the ADF, or after the Bill Will bonds roll off, we would take a bigger piece.
Right, but why did it go up $1.8 million in the fourth year of the ADF funds?
Why did they go from 3.9 to 5.7?
Yeah.
They follow how the debt service drops. So in the first few years, the debt service that's dropping is 3.9, and then another piece of, I believe it's 1.7, drops off the years after.
The ADF funds?
Of the ADF
Oh, okay.
funds. Once the road bonds kicked in, we made the decision, and again, this is all subject to argument. We were trying to leave some of that extra money in the corporate fund because we do recognize that we'll have some other capital needs that are not public safety or transportation, which means they'd have to be covered from a source other than RTA. So that was just kind of looking forward. We certainly could use the whole 4.7 or 5.7 and use a little bit less of RTA, but that's a decision that's way in the future, and it's kind of hard to predict what our needs are going to be.
So 15 years from now, we find ourselves in a position where we need more road funds. We could actually drop to 6.8 and then re-increase the other
Yes,
side.
yes, yes.
And by the same token, what I'm saying is we can only use those RTA for public safety. So if we have some other need that isn't public safety, then we need some of that money from this column. So that's where we have to play that control of which funds we use.
You know, I know I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again, because I know it really doesn't seem to get through to folks. I don't have to say this. You know, when we do a bond issue, or maybe Leslie can shed light, we don't say, here are the revenue streams. We say it's backed by all the revenue, primarily, of Bill Collins. I know we wanted to see breakdowns, exactly how the flow chart would be of revenue streams, but really, when it comes down to it, when you pay the bonds, you don't sit there and go, hey, what revenue stream did we take it out of this year? The practicality of it is you're seeing detail that really ultimately is you know, I don't want to say it's not important, but that's paid from the revenue. You know, if there's adjustments that are made down the line, then they're made down the line. Maybe they say, well, you know what, we don't need to take as much from the RTA, we'll put a little more toward road, just come out of general fund. But at the end of the day, they're not going to sit down when they pay the bond issue and identify revenue streams. Am I correct? I mean, you may say this is the revenue. You don't sit down and say, the only thing that gets identified or comes into play is if it's a restricted fund. Otherwise, it's all general fund money. If it's a restricted fund, then it's probably important that it's identified to say we're appropriately using RTA for a public safety project. Otherwise, I wouldn't get real hung up on these revenue streams. I just want to throw that out because at the end of the day, it just says here are revenue streams, and here's probably how the money would come out. But it's all one big pile of money. And when it sits in the treasurer's office, it's a pot of money, with the exception of the revenue stream.
I think the important thing is
that's
that
what
we
make
have
it
enough
clear.
revenue to pay off the bonds. And that's why we wanted to show the projections all the way through, is to say that we're not going to be issuing bonds that we may not be able to pay. I think when you look later at the end of the day, balances in the RTA fund, there's substantial balances available for debt service. That's the important thing to me.
And I think she's right. Just showing how the revenues support the debt. You know, same thing when you see schedules of bond debt for public bond debt. It's not like your home mortgage, you know, $900 to interest and $200 to principal, and it goes right down the line. well, you get more principal as you go along. It's not, it is a little irregular. Sometimes when they do the structuring, we may make more principal payments one year than we, an extra principal payment. Or we might just have an interest payment, depending how it's structured. So our revenues will accomplish how we're going forward. So I guess this is a long-winded way of saying, don't get too detailed in that, or control with all the detail, because it doesn't really, and it will change. It will change. Yeah. If all of a sudden, for example, for whatever reason, this county says we're going to raise our real estate tax rates, well then you might take more money out of the real estate portion of the general fund. So, but there definitely will be changes, I think. Okay.
Okay, I'm on page 5 now, and I'm going to go over one of the things we thought was important. Since RTA is a large funding source for these capital projects going forward, we kind of wanted to see what that would look like, making sure we could cover the cost for Weber Road, pay cash for the facilities that we want to pay cash for, and continue debt service for both the roads and the new bonds. The first column is just a year. The second column starts with the cash balance that we had on hand at November 30th, which is $44.7 million. The column next to that shows revenue growth at 3%. As Mike had referred to earlier, we're currently earning between 4 and 4, or growing by 4 to 4.5%. This is a little conservative. So in the back of your mind, we probably will continue to grow at 4%, which gives us a little more flexibility, but we wanted to be conservative in our presentation. The next column over is the expenses that are going to come out of this RTA fund. The detail for that is a little further over to your right. And I'll kind of go through those. And the detail rolls up into this total. The first thing we have is existing and new road projects. This is what we're anticipating we'd be able to dedicate every year. Only at 3% growth. If we have 4% growth, we certainly could push those up. That's something that'll change as we go forward. Weber Road, we're assuming at $45 million. 25 would come out of RTA, 20 out of motor fuel tax. We have that happening in the next 3 years. Again, we're not quite sure. We keep hearing it's happening. I don't know that we're being asked to come up with money yet, but we have it earmarked for that. The next column is the debt on the current road bonds. You'll see that goes out through 2030. That is coming from the RTA fund. The next few columns are what we're going to pay, use the RTA reserves to pay for. Sheriff's facility, again, the dollar amounts are estimates. We're estimating $20 million for that. A dispatch center at $5 million. The radio system, including equipment, $8.1 million. Case management system at 2.5. That is a real rough estimate. And then finally, the portion of RTA that will be used to meet the debt service on the new bonds that we're going to issue. If you go back over to the first set of columns, you can see as money comes in and then we pay our bills, we have a projected carry forward or reserve at the end of the year. It does dip down in 2017 a little low. We were trying to keep it in line with what our debt service payments are going to be. Again, if the growth is actually 4%, we'll be a little closer to that. Trying to be very conservative. And you can see once we get to about 2030, when the road bonds drop off, we have a lot more revenue available. And maybe that would be a time where we're able to do some more big projects. But for now, we're staying on track with what we have been doing as far as spending on road projects. The columns all the way at the end on the right outline the percent of RTA revenue that will be spent on building road bonds, the percent that's currently spent on road debt, and the percent that will be spent on road projects. Again, all of these can fluctuate depending on what the revenue dollars are and what the expenses actually end up being. The next page is motor fuel. Again, a similar layout for that. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but the motor fuel tax fund ended the year with almost 72.5 million. We would continue to use that for road projects and road maintenance and cover 20 million of the Weber Road. Keeping a reserve in that going forward. And then finally, on the last page, we're showing the annual amount available for road projects. What's coming out of RTA, what's coming out of motor fuel tax, and covering Weber Road. Now, in the next 6 years, we'll spend based on this plan, we'll spend $182 million on road projects, Weber Road and others, which still keeps us at a $30 million average per year. That's where we had been trying to keep the budget. When we had the road bonds available of $100 million, we spent somewhere between 28 and 30 a year. So that is realistic. Weber Road is an anomaly, and we might have a couple other anomalies like that pop up. But for now, we're being consistent and steady with our road spending. There are a few years after that where the spending drops a little. Again, that's all dependent on how the revenue comes in. It's very hard to predict that far going forward because we have no control over how those revenues grow. It's not anything we can do better or, reconfigure. The money comes to us based on sales tax. So, in closing, I'd like to.
Let her close.
Okay. I just want to say that this plan is what we consider a compromise. It allows the county to continue to address our capital needs while still providing funds for operations and roads. And I guess that's it. So,
Mine's pretty quick, and it had to do with the last item.
We'll take questions. We've got Jackie.
Yeah. Just the Weber Road, and I think I'm saying something that was said last week by Corey Singer. Let's assume the state doesn't fund anything on Weber Road. What was their portion of Weber? Do they have a portion in that race? I mean, I know some of the money's coming from the Fed, most of it actually.
Weber Road's a state project. We're doing a part of that, but it's really a state project.
Right, but aren't they getting some money from the Feds for that?
I think a lot of it's coming from the Fed. But I guess my point is, you asked about the state. I guess if the state pulled out, there'd be no project. It is their project.
Okay, well, that's my question, because, there's...
Then I assume we wouldn't do our part of the project.
Okay, all right.
Bruce, you're out there.
I am.
Am I saying it correctly? If they didn't do the project, we probably wouldn't do that. Bruce is going, this is about buildings. Well, I get you.
What was the question again, sir?
Well, if the state pull out of the Weber Road project, then there's no project. It's their project, correct?
Yeah.
Then we continue to do our work.
The interchange is IDOT's.
Right.
That's not our project. But the section that is the section, the piece north of Rodeo to 119th and south of Northtown to 135th Street. That is our project.
Well, if the state didn't do the interchange, would we do ours? That's the question.
No, we would not.
Okay. There's your answer. I guess there's no project if the state doesn't do it. So, thanks, Bruce.
Mine is really a comment. I think all of you know that I believe the courthouse in downtown Joliet is fundamental, that we need the sheriff's facility not only for public safety but for the health and well-being of our employees, and that health department upgrades are absolutely necessary, that the radio system, the case management system, and a continued road fund are absolutely essential to Joliet's well-being, and this plan should be provided for that. I want to thank the Executive's Office for the help. I want to thank you, especially Mike. few weeks back, I asked you to include Steve because he had done some earlier work on that, and you heard that. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. I think everything that is important to me, that I value for this county, is included in this plan, and I encourage my fellow board members to support it.
Okay. I'm going to make that one.
Thank you, Denise. One of the things I did want to mention, when we looked at, if you looked at the original plan, we did, and just so everybody understands kind of what did change, we did change. Originally, we were talking about doing construction loan, line of credit, and we changed that because after doing more research on that, financially it didn't make as much sense as us using some cash and then paying ourselves back. Ultimately, it'll save us money over doing a construction loan. So that's how we came. So if you look back at the old one, you'll say what happened to the line of credit. That disappeared completely. As we use the cash, we're kind of borrowing from ourselves to start the projects rather than borrowing from somebody else.
Les, do you have anything?
This might be way too premature, but I was wondering if there was any detail on the health department upgrades. That's the only thing that I'm less familiar with the scope of the project, involved.
About the building itself?
Yes.
No, I mean, we're a ways away from that. I mean, I think once we get through the design, once we break ground on the sheriff's department and kind of get the design going on the courthouse, then we can get super serious about that. But again, since we're not going to start for a couple of years, we have time to kind of vet all of what they need and how they need it.
Ken, did you have a comment?
Yes. We use RTA funds, just so I understand this clearly. Because of public safety, we're going to use a portion of that to build a building, or any building in general. Now, since that's public safety, that building has to be used for public safety. We cannot convert that use later, correct?
I would assume that's the case, but I can't see us using those buildings for anything but public safety use. It's a courthouse, very specific, specifically built for that function. Really, it has a single-purpose function. Even though there would be a, well, I'll say an office portion, it's still pretty much a single-function building. Can only be used for that. So I don't see that as becoming an issue down the line.
And realistically, that building isn't built just by RTA funds. So I mean, if we got to where someone said, hey, only 85% of that is RTA, we have all those other funding sources like the fee and the parking lot that isn't restricted, even though we restricted it to the courthouse building.
RTA probably wouldn't exceed 25% of it. Okay. Mr. Howard?
I'd like to, I appreciate the detail in this. I thank you very much. Thanks, Mike, Steve, and the executive staff, and then the leadership for providing this, because I mean, it actually helps us get our hands around this whole thing. And then initially, I believe the problem with the initial plan was basically, pardon an old expression, was steal from Peter to pay Paul. And I think that this basically alleviates some of that now. I mean, we can actually look and find out. But I also want to remind everybody, though, I mean, there is the roads. The roads are very, very important to us, and I think we continue to need to put an emphasis on that. And also another side benefit of this project here is I think this is actually a stimulus or a job creation bill for the city of Joliet. I think this is going to be an added benefit of that, and I'm sure the trade unions are going to really appreciate the amount of work that is actually going to provide. And hats off to the design of the building. I mean, it looks like it's going to be the crown jewel of the Joliet area. So, but thanks again for all of the work on this, and I mean, it really made a lot of things clear today. So, thanks.
It's more of a comment. I just want to, thank everyone that, put their time and effort into this. I know I continually expressed over the last year as a chair of Capitol that this is a nonpartisan issue. This is something that we all knew that we needed. It was just how are we going to get this done, especially financially. And numbers is not my thing. That's Mike, and thank you. And then thank you, Steve, so much. Thank you to the executive. Thank you to the city of Joliet, both parties here at the county board. and leadership. I really can't thank you all, and I'm really excited to work with you all to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job. It's an outstanding framework. I think the entire plan that came together, I think you guys both did a great job. My concern is not with the plan. It's not with moving forward. I think we absolutely agree with Ms. Winfrey. We'll move forward. These are vital to the county. My only concern is looking at the timing. And I know we talked about this, Mike. Yesterday, I was on a 2-hour conference call, risk assessment conference call with the feds, and I would be remiss if I didn't at least bring it up. We understand that the interest rates are going to move. And although we could sit here and we could say, well, we don't know, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, maybe it'll be lower, I really don't think there's a single economist out there that believes the interest rates are going to drop over the next 2 years. In fact, in the meeting, most of them expressed potentially 8 quarter-point increases in the next 2 years. Goldman Sachs, 2016, they believe 1%, Bank of America 1%, the Fed officials believe 1%, JP Morgan was 1.5%, which I believe is a little bit liberal. Great Lakes was a little more conservative, about 0.5, 0.75. When looking at the bonding, I think it's going to be important that we, obviously, this is a great plan, and it works on paper, but if we go into the first bonding issue and we're already 1% or 1.5% higher than what this shows, it could skew it. I would be, looking at what I heard in this meeting and looking at what's in front of us, I think potentially we may have to look at bonding out a very large portion of it up front early on to really secure it. Just to give you an idea, based on the 4.25% in that first column, if we were to bond the entire $225 million right away and use some of that money from cash and help pay some of the bond payments in the first couple of years, we will save the taxpayers about $13 million just based on the plan. That's if we only get out of paying at those rates at the plan versus what these economists think. Now, I don't believe that it's going to go up 2-3% like many of the economists think. However, if it does start at 5%, it will be $29 million more in interest payments over the life of the loan. And it would bring our payments, instead of 15.1, it would bring up to almost $16 million out of every year annual expense. So I think moving forward, I think the projects are great. I think we're going to build them. They're going to be beautiful in the end. But I think we may need to look a little closer at bonding out the entire thing, bringing it up front. And like Mike has been saying for the last couple, 6 months, this is a plan. And I think we may need to look at that.
Let me say this. Let me say this. Just to kind of lay out how the county does this, how we structure it. And Leslie, if you want to make comment, what we do is after we pass everything, we will then give an authorization resolution that authorizes us to go out to bond for $220 million. Then generally, on the advice of, in this case, Wells Fargo, Victor Chang and his team, they will advise us. We should move on the market now. We should do $100 million. So that is done. I mean, it's not that we don't do that. This is just how it's kind of listed out there. This is a proposed. But if there's rapid changes in the market, we'll have everything in place that we can move very quickly. And those bonds can be sold within a week. That's the way we've always done it. What generally happens is the county executive, usually the speaker, have to sign off on it. Say, yeah, let's move now. So that's already, just to put you at ease, we do that. We always have done that.
Well, it definitely makes me feel.
So we've done it. Believe me, we'll have everything in place so we can move quickly in the market. We have.
It's interesting, too, if you read today's article about Yellen's meeting yesterday, since inflation isn't moving like they think, They're talking they may not take all.
Like I said, instead of 8, they might go to 4,
Right,
which is
they might not take
1%,
all. They might
which
not
is still
take all.
higher than what we had planned. So that's all I'm saying. I think it needs to definitely be in place so where we can go and grab a large chunk of this. Even if we put the money in the bank at 0.1%, we're still going to get $200,000 in interest and save 10 to 15, $20 million in the end of the tax rate.
And let me say this about the feds and the and the predictions. You know, I follow the same things. And I've been hearing for the last 5 years they're going to raise rates. For the last 5 years, rates are going to be raised over the next 5 years. And then, of course, they hold it off because of economic conditions. You know, I can tell you that for this year, I don't think they're going to raise it anymore this year.
You think they're going to go the
They will
entire
not,
16?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, I disagree with that.
I will tell you why. So the decline, whether it's the right thing to do, it may be the right thing to raise it, but they won't because they won't have there's the political portion. And with the economy, it's tanking, your 401ks are tanking, they're not going to raise it.
Yeah, you're right.
And
I'm with you, Jim.
So,
You're with Jim.
the reality is, these are long-term rates that we're
Yes.
talking about. And these are
They're not affected yet.
these are market-driven rates. The prime could go up 2%, and long-term rates may only go up 0.5%. Because
That's right.
they tend to build
That's
the rate,
true.
they tend to build their rate structure off of supply and demand of buying the bonds, not necessarily short-term political purposes, which is what the prime tends to be. So if the rate's going to go up, it's going to go up, regardless of what prime does. If it's going to stay the way it is, it's going to stay the way it is.
Steve is absolutely right. Long-term rates are totally different.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that we can do, and we talk about this, is if we structure the principal payments so that maybe in the earlier years when we're a little more lean in our cash flow, maybe the costs come in a little higher than we thought. We can forego principal payments. It's going to cost a little more in interest, but we can level off our payments a little bit more that way. And therefore, if you look at the model, RTA does get a little bit light in the early 20s by not paying maybe a couple million of principal for a few years and then building it up when our fund balance is due regain. We can afford to build as much building as we need and not worry as much. So the flexibility will be there. We just need to wait and see what the market's like when it comes time to sell the bonds.
Once again, if you want to make any comments, but they do a pretty good job of structuring things.
Correct.
Yeah, I think this was mentioned that this is very preliminary and we can explore a lot of different options of the timing and also with the different bonding amounts. And one thing that we've also looked at is maybe, issuing a little more backloaded while rates are lower and kind of filling it in. But that is all stuff that we can explore over time.
Two more questions. And I know you said this, Karen, but it's not in my vernacular. What is BAB/RZEDB rebate?
Build America bonds.
rebate.
Oh, okay.
Recovery zone economic
Gotcha.
development.
Yeah, okay, all right. And then the intergovernmental agreement, the last meeting, maybe the committee as a whole, I thought I was told that this intergovernmental agreement has already been signed. In fact, I'm pretty 99.9% sure. And yet, in the presentation, it was talking about it being signed in 2018. So which is it?
We agreed on the
You'll see it.
language.
One sees, one responds.
You will be approving. It hasn't come to the board yet for approval.
Okay.
Joliet's going to approve it on the 19th, and we'll be the 21st.
And we'll be on the 21st. So
Okay.
you'll approve it next week.
All right. Yeah, because I know I was told that it's already
The
been
language has
decided.
been decided.
The way the agreement reads is they start payment when we start construction. When we put the first thing in the ground.
Okay. So
That's
it's more
why it's
about your
2018.
version. Right. Okay.
No secrets, we don't do this in the back room, it has to come to you.
I did want to say again that, what Leslie is saying about money, we didn't give this to Wells Fargo just a couple of days ago, and we told them, we know you don't have time to make it look pretty today. That's their charge now. Now they go to work and they'll start figuring out how, based on everything we kind of saw today, how it worked best for us, beside those last minute moves and stuff, that they're going to start at the process.
And just to be clear, we have additional options in terms of paying this money back. If down the road we decide we want to do a public safety tax, any of those things, those are still on the table.
Right.
Okay. I just want to hear that.
If there's additional revenue streams, like I say, it's the pool of revenue. I mean, the board, we've never done this before, let me say. For whatever reason, this time the board, I think along with the county executive's office, wanted to see revenue sheet. Because this really almost is a cash flow chart of how cash flows. So you're looking at a cash flow. Once again, as I mentioned earlier, if there's additional revenue, it goes in the pot. This is paid out of the corporate fund and the various revenues. I mean, the only thing that you really have to be careful with is funds that are special restricted funds. So, yeah, so that all changes. So for those of you who want to put a public safety tax initiative forward, feel free to do so. You know, I mean, you could do that. So, yeah, okay, well, go ahead, Don.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for their hard work they put into this. I know that I asked for the workshop on this last month, and I'm glad that we had the time to work together, and I appreciate the help of both sides of the aisle. Steve, great job helping out there. Mike, good job on bringing us the original plan and sitting down and having the willingness to compromise, put together the best plan possible. Thank you to the county executive staff. I see this, like you said, Jim, this is, it's all revenue. But this is a proof to us as a board that it's possible for us to make the payments on these bonds to move forward. And I think it may also be, at least in the first few years of this, it may give us some guidelines as we go through the budget process on where the income streams are going to be at that we're going to use to make the original parts of this. I know this thing's going to morph and change over time, but I have a great deal of confidence in this and the people who put it together, and I'd ask that the board support it also. Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to also thank everybody in their hard work for this. I mean, this is a project that, you know, we've been putting together for 10 years. From the original White study, and I see Steve out there, you know, putting the plans together of our entire capital assessment, to getting down here and having Reagan and Mike actually bring this to fruition and get it to a point where we can actually make this happen. And I might want to point out, make it happen without a tax increase. There is a revenue stream here that is coming out without a tax increase to be able to support the capital needs of this county. And it can't happen unless we do this in a very planful, bipartisan way. So I want to thank everybody on both sides of the aisle for all the hard work they've done, not only this year, but over the time it's taken to get us to this point. So thank you very much, and Jim, thank you for your leadership on this. You know, a lot of this wouldn't happen without having good leadership.
Mr. Brooks?
Mr. Speaker, I think it would be redundant of me to repeat the sentiments of everybody in this room. I think you know by now how both sides of the aisle feel, and we're excited about this project. But I did want you to know, I too want to thank everybody that did all the hard work and put in, particularly the staff, the executive and the county board staff, for the work that they've done. And I'm looking forward to working with them. And lastly, I need to say this. That drawing of that courthouse is so beautiful that I look forward to getting into trouble and going there. Thank you so much.
And you're going to hire me.
It'll be my first time. I'm hiring. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to make a quick comment. You know, one of the great things, even though I said, you know, this is a lot of detail that, you know, that necessarily doesn't pertain to how the bonds are paid. This has been a great exercise to show everyone cash flow within the county and how revenue streams and how it funds. So this has really been, I think, a very important, informative, and educational process for folks who haven't been around as long and as old as I am. So I think it has been a really a good way of going about it. The other thing I want to also mention, you know, Mike mentioned that probably one of the primary changes was that we took out the construction loan kind of portion. One of the great things about this plan, I believe, is the flexibility that you will have within it. You know, we did an intent to bond up to $275 million. And of course, what that gives us the ability to do is we can reimburse any cash reserves or cash accounts if we needed to. So we're using cash, but the great thing is down the road, if a future board really felt they needed to reimburse the cash reserves for some reason, you have the ability to do that. So I think that's a great flexibility within this plan. But you know, we look at cash flows and look all these years. I'm going to bring up another subject that Steve, we've been talking about this forever. This maybe gives us the opportunity to go to a multi-year budgeting process, which would be extremely helpful. Yeah. We only, of course, approve a budget on an annual basis. But to do multi-year budgeting lays out the plan for future years. We've talked about this, we've talked about it, but we've never done it. So I'm going to perhaps give the challenge to the executive committee and to our finance department. Now's the time. We should start working on it now. We have 10 months or 8 months to do that. So I'm going to throw that back on the table, Steve. You think we can do it this time?
I think so.
I said, let's do it. You know, Steve is retiring after this year from the board. And he's not retiring, he's retiring from the board. So I say, in Steve's honor, let's get this thing done. So I'm going to go, so you'll be disappointed, Steve, if we don't get it done. So yeah, no pressure. So, but I do think that we need to start it now, start having those discussions, which means, you know, I know it's more work, but we need to bring in some temporary additional resources. Maybe we can do that
Put in a
too.
flood for a finance system.
Well, let me say this, that I think that's part of this overall capital plan, and I have no problem putting the finance system up front.
That will help with the multi-year budget.
Okay, well, if that's what it's, we're going to do it. So I think if that's something that takes priority for us to meet some of our other goals, then we should be doing that. So taking off all roadblocks, taking away all excuses, we'll do what it takes. What do you think there, Mr. Executive?
He's gone.
He's gone. He's gone. See, I can't see that. I just see bodies out there. You know. Oh, he's gone. Well, I'm sure he would agree with me. Yeah. Okay.
So do you think it's appropriate to make a motion to move our framework forward?
Yes, this will go. Well, let me make this hopefully clear. We're going to move. We're going to have a resolution on the county board, which we'll do in the executive committee, moving the bonding forward. You know, this isn't. This is you have this information. This will not be part of the resolution. This is this detail for you had understanding. What you'll see in the resolution is primarily this dollar amounts. So this was just back up for you to see the cash flow, how there's enough cash flow to support the bonding. So you understand that. So at the executive committee, somebody will be making a motion to place this on the county board agenda for next week. Okay? So we don't need to do any action here. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now what? We're going to get right into the executive committee, so